courtesy of Jay Swavey.
From fans, for the fans.
The best place for league updates.
The hottest takes on the internet. Welcome to Cal's Call.
I'm Joe Callamore.
I'm Mickey.
And we're going to be going over some of the trade deadline, the deals that went on. We're going to be giving out grades for those. Let's start on the trade deadline. Mickey, what do you think was the most important move for any of the teams that made a trade on the trade deadline day?
It's tough, but I think Toronto getting Marcus Gasol.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there.
It's just great for them. I mean, especially after Philadelphia went up and got up Tobias Harris and Boban, you had to go make a move to get you back in the East in the contention.
Definitely. I agree with all those points. I think the Marcus Gasol is going to be a great piece for them. It's going to be interesting. I mean, I've been reading some articles. It seems as though, yeah, they got a great player, but how are they going to integrate him into the lineup? Because you could start him. If you do, then do you move Ibaka to the 4, which he played for most of his career, but now he's been playing the 5 lately in Toronto. And then what happens to Pascal Siakam? It then becomes, are you going to start Pascal Siakam at the 4 or Ibaka at the 4? Who's going to the bench? Is it Gasol going to the bench? Because I don't think you're utilizing him properly, sending him to the bench. And then I also saw some scenarios where they play Siakam at the 3. I don't think that works. I think it's going to be best for them to play Lowry, Green, and Kawhi. I don't think Kawhi would be better at the 2 position, but you never know. If they want to go extremely big, they could try to play Kawhi at the 2 position. But yeah, I would agree with you there. I think that's definitely probably the biggest move that went on. But you also mentioned the Tobias Harris trade. What do you think of that trade?
I mean, Philadelphia is really going for it. Got to give credit to Elton Brand, who's putting together a contender, and I mean, he's giving him position. Also got rid of Markelle Fultz, who's been a colossal bust right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
doing a great job.
Very, very true. I think Fultz is going to also benefit from going to a point guard needy team in Orlando. Yeah. Although they really develop players very well, but
no.
I mean,
I think you'd have to have faith in them, though. There's a lot of points that you just mentioned that we can touch on today. Number one, Elton Brand. He went from being a player just 4 years ago to now a first-year GM. He's doing a great job. He's made 2 huge deals in a matter of 1 season. He's kind of taking risks that not a lot of GMs would make. He's traded for 2 star players in 1 season. That's unprecedented. Traded for Jimmy Butler, then traded for Tobias Harris. I think those are 2 great deals if you're trying to contend. For Philadelphia, honestly, I think it's best to make the deals that he did. Why? Because at the end of the day, they weren't going to get a superstar in a couple years, and you want to maximize having Ben Simmons on a rookie deal now so you can actually maximize your contract value. Like right now, they can afford to have 2 other max contracts in Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler, whereas in a couple years down the road, once Simmons gets his extension, it's going to be almost impossible to add those contracts on. So I think they did a great job maximizing the value with this trade. But yeah, definitely with that. You said Markelle Fultz too is going to be benefiting from this. That's a great point. He will be going to a very point guard needy team in Orlando. I think he has the chance to develop over there. I know Orlando hasn't done the greatest job of developing their in-house talent in the past couple of years. Just looking at players like Aaron Gordon, who's great, but he's not an all-star, not yet. Vucevic, who they got in the Dwight Howard trade 5 or 6 years back. They've developed him pretty well, but again, they haven't developed a winning culture. I think Markelle Fultz could help change that. I think that I'm confident in Steve Clifford, who just spent a couple of years in Charlotte developing Kemba Walker's game. I think I'm confident in his ability to develop Markelle Fultz. It's mainly just a confidence issue with Fultz and getting back into the rhythm he was at when he played at Washington. If you get that player, if you're Orlando, you won this trade deadline out of anybody. More than Toronto did with Marcus Gasol, more than Philly did with Tobias Harris. The Orlando Magic will win this trade because at the end of the day, they traded a 2nd-round pick, a mid to late first-rounder in Oklahoma City's first-rounder this year, and Jonathan Simmons for a former number 1 overall pick. That's tremendous value. I do understand that number 1 overall picks do get a lot higher rookie contracts than normal rookies, but it's still tremendous value to buy low, extremely low on Markelle Fultz while you can. So overall, I think the Eastern Conference did make some great moves. I think another very underrated move that could end up making the most effect this season is going to be Nikola Mirotic to the Milwaukee Bucks. If you're looking at that team, they're lengthy, they're great defenders, but they need to add more shooting. I think adding Mirotic is a great solution to that. He's going to be fantastic in that lineup. I think putting him next to Giannis Antetokounmpo, Eric Bledsoe, Chris Middleton, and Brook Lopez is going to be fantastic. He doesn't necessarily have to start. They already have Ersan Ilyasova there. They also have who's their starting forward? Who's their starting power forward? I'm trying to think. They have Brook Lopez. Oh, they have Giannis. Oh, they play Tony Snell. That's right. So now they do have a more natural power forward. They typically play Giannis at the 4 position. They have a more natural power forward now if they want to move Giannis back to the 3. I think he'd be best off the bench. but you could definitely utilize him both ways. Either way, the Eastern Conference made a ton of moves this year in the post-LeBron era, which I think is fantastic for them because I think the East is on the rise more so than the West is, honestly. I think so. I think we saw this trade deadline. You saw the Western teams kind of take a step back, not be able. I think at this point, the issue with the Western Conference is that they are obviously in terms of parity better than the Eastern Conference. The playoff race is just a lot tighter with winning records, not losing records. But the very bottom is the worst of the league. And it's gotten to the point where everything's so close knit, like in terms of standings, that teams aren't willing to make trades with each other in the event that they end up getting the bad side of it, and then they miss the playoffs compared to creating a contender in another Western Conference team. So I think that's one of the issues going on in the West right now. But overall, fantastic trade deadline. It was very entertaining. I know the Tobias Harris trade, that was crazy timing. I was actually in the middle of writing that trade deadline article, if anybody read it, when he got traded there. And I was actually talking about a potential Blake Griffin to the Sixers situation, which obviously got negated once they traded for Tobias Harris. But overall, very, very intriguing trade deadline. Any other moves that caught your attention, Mickey, other than the Bucks?
The Kings are finally looking to end that playoff drought, getting Harrison Barnes. I mean, Barnes, he hasn't really been the same since leaving Golden State, in my opinion, but he's still still solid, averaging 17 points per game, right? Around there?
Yeah, he's a little bit under 20 points per game right now. It's definitely a solid score to add to that core. I think he's going to play really well next to De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield. One of the issues going to the Mavericks is that he was one of the top two offensive weapons they had, so a lot of defenses could keen in on him. It's not going to be the same now. It's not going to be the same as Golden State, obviously, when he was there with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, but it'll be similar. I mean, you have De'Aaron Fox blowing by defenders, which is going to leave two people going to guard him and double him in the lane. Obviously, if there's somebody sagging, you can kick it out to somebody like a Buddy Hield or a Harrison Barnes for a knockdown three. I think it's a great game plan for Sacramento. They do have Bogdan Bogdanovic already, so they do have a three or a more natural two guard, but they do have a three man already. But I think Harrison Barnes is just going to add to the depth there. They traded Justin Jackson, who I don't think is the greatest prospect. I never thought he was to be drafted in the middle of the first round. I thought he was always kind of a reach. But for the Mavericks, at least they're just getting a 3-and-D wing for the bench, and for the Kings, they're getting more of a solid offensive weapon in the starting unit. So it's kind of a win-win for both teams. Did you also see? I kind of think a little bit of underrated of a move is it was kind of crazy because the Rockets made a lot of moves just to save money, but they got Iman Shumpert. I know we were just talking about him last week. Underrated player this year. He's playing fantastic defense. He's always been a great athlete. Obviously, he's part of the title-winning Cavs teams. He's a great athlete, and he's a good basketball player. He just, in terms of consistency on the offensive end, that's where you kind of worry about him. But you're playing against James Harden and Chris Paul. You don't necessarily need that go-to scorer. You just need a defender and somebody who can hit an occasional three when he's open, and that's what Iman Shumpert can give you. So I think he can give you that better than James Ennis. I think that was a good move for the Houston Rockets, although I would have liked to see them make a couple more moves this trade deadline. They at least got a good player for the potential starting lineup in Iman Shumpert.
What about our boy Stanley Johnson?
Oh yeah. Might as well talk about this trade too. I think that was a fantastic trade all around. Now, in terms of production from both players, I don't know if it'll be that great of a trade, but in terms of fairness, if we're looking at it, I think back in the 2016 draft, you had Stanley Johnson going number 7, and I believe it was Thon Maker going number 10. So literally, it was basically just trading the number 7, number 10 picks of the same draft, both of whom haven't had the greatest chance to develop in their respective teams, mainly because of opportunity. Stanley Johnson did get a better opportunity when he started his career, but a lack of offensive consistency really hurt him in terms of getting minutes with Stan Van Gundy. They were looking for playoff pushes, and Stanley Johnson didn't necessarily provide that. He provided more of like a promising young prospect. They didn't develop him correctly. Hopefully Milwaukee can. I think Milwaukee's going to utilize him off the bench very well. He's going to be very important to bring off the bench in Milwaukee.
Flipped him.
Oh, they flipped him?
Yeah.
To the Pelicans.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. They did. I forgot that. That was like an underrated one. Is they immediately traded him later that day, and I think it was just for cap. It was just for cap space too, right? They didn't even trade.
I got Mirotic out of it.
Oh, is that? Oh, so they
Mirotic was a steal.
Yeah, I totally blanked on that. For Mirotic, I was just thinking they gave up who? They gave up two second round picks, and somebody else. Was it just 2 second rounders and Stanley Johnson? I think that's what it must have been. I totally misspoke there. But it was a good swap. Honestly, that swap for Thon and Stanley Johnson made a lot of sense. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He did end up going to the Pelicans later that day, and I just totally blanked on that right now. I don't know how I forgot that. But Thon Maker, it's going to be a questionable fit in Detroit. Obviously, he's backing up Andre Drummond. I think it's going to be a cool, in terms of the developmental process, seeing what he can do. His agent wanted him to go to a team with more opportunity. I'm not sure if that's the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, they already have two bona fide stars in that front court in Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. I don't know if there's room to get that many more minutes in Detroit than there was in Milwaukee for him. I think he would have been better on a team like the Cavs. But again, depending upon, and if you read my article, you know this, if the Pistons end up moving on from their two big men, then this is a great place for Thon Maker to develop, become an inside-outside weapon in Detroit. But there's not that much media attention. There won't be the highest of expectations. He can just learn to just keep developing, and maybe one day be a French all-star type player. Looking at like a Nikola Vucevic type. He's obviously not in the same build. He's not as big. He doesn't have the same skill set. But in just terms of overall talent, he could develop that way in Detroit if they move on from their big men such as Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Stanley Johnson did end up going to the Pelicans. Now that's a better fit, in my opinion, than the Pistons. And like we just mentioned, he wasn't developed right there. At least in New Orleans, once the Anthony Davis trade is complete, more than likely you're looking at them to get Jason Tatum from the Celtics. At least that's every direction that it's pointing at right now. Either way, they'll be getting some young prospects in. I think Stanley Johnson will get more of a time to develop slower and not be thrust into the lineup and forced to be an offensive weapon when he's not that right now. And at the end of the day, even if he ends up just being a defensive specialist throughout his career, that's okay. I mean, there's always room for that in the NBA. As long as there's going to be great offensive weapons, you need great defensive pieces too. But
Tony Allen. He could be like Tony Allen.
Yeah, Tony Allen. That's a good one. I mean, I think they're actually the same. No, Stanley Johnson's around 6'7". Tony was around 6'5", 6'6". But yeah, I mean, that's a good comparison. He's kind of like the small forward version of Tony. He fits that mold. He's just not the greatest offensive piece, but you don't necessarily need that depending on what you need. Like right now, even if you look at like Marcus Smart in Boston, he's not the greatest offensive weapon, although he has developed the three ball. But again, just great defender. There's always room for those in the NBA.